Okay, can I remind all members to, and everybody else in the room, to switch off all electronic devices, and remind members on the protocols around the use of their electronic tablets. Could I ask any member to declare interests relevant to any item on the agenda today? If there are none to declare, then we move on. Any policies to record? None to record. Okay, members, thank you. Draft minutes. They're page 5 of your pack. Members content with the minutes as drafted from the 26th of February meeting. Agreed. Chairperson business. Just to remind ourselves that at last week's meeting, the committee agreed that I would meet with the Minister to discuss the issue of the Special Advisor fact-finding report. Obviously, I just want to record the fact that the meeting did not take place this week. The Minister has provided a letter offering a reason for that and further information, and that's at page 9 of the tabled items folder. They understand the technically is that the DSO was not available, and the Minister had indicated that since it was a formal meeting on behalf of the committee and committee clerk and so on would be in attendance, that the Minister wanted to have the DSO available with him. The DSO has been off all of this past week due to, I understand, traffic collision. Has been unavailable, and the Minister was suggesting a meeting next Tuesday, but you'll see in the last line of the Minister's letter that he cannot accede to the proposal contained in the letter to him from this committee last week. So on that basis, it was suggested no point in doing a meeting with the Minister, because no point in me going down a negotiation that's going to put a proposal which the Minister pulled out. So on that basis, there's no point in doing a meeting on that basis. So, obviously, as I said, the Minister had suggested a meeting early next week, but it's clearly pointless on that basis. Okay, so I mean, obviously,
he didn't really need legal advice at all. He didn't really need legal advice at all.
Well, whatever, but I'm just making the point that he's reeling out the proposal, so on that basis, it's be pointless to discuss it.
So what does that mean then happens next week?
Well, what I was going to suggest is that we discuss that in terms of our next steps in the context of the closed session after this meeting, the open session of this meeting concludes. So we need to decide what we're going to do in response to the Minister's letter. All I'm saying is the Minister ruled out the proposal that the committee agreed to last week, so there's no point in doing a meeting to discuss that proposal.
No, but there was to be a discussion between you and the Minister.
On the proposal.
Well, there was to be a meeting between you and the Minister.
On the proposal.
No, there was a meeting, because I was the person who made the suggestion.
You were indeed, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was a discussion to take place between you and the Minister.
And I made it very clear.
It hasn't taken place yet.
And I made it very clear I was reluctant to have a meeting to come back here with the danger of misrepresenting the Minister.
You did indeed.
I then, Tim Walliser, made it clear that obviously the meeting would be with the committee clerk. It was to discuss the proposal.
He may well have done, but that's not what I proposed.
Well,
however, we'll have it in, we'll have a meeting in closed session.
Yeah, that's the best idea. Okay. We have an invitation, also a request for myself to meet with the Lisburn Parish Forum. Yeah, and we did that. I mean, I'll go ahead and do that meeting. Okay, just to refer to matters arising, page 13 of your meeting pack, in relation to phase 2 of the report. Again, I suggest we deal with this in the closed session later. Okay. The committee, as you know, we have some time ago considered the potential for visiting a number of locations to explore various approaches in relation to social housing. The Minister has readily advised the committee that he will be attending a number of those locations in England, Bath, Manchester, Liverpool and Coventry as part of that work programme, and is happy to extend an invitation to the committee, and his dates are around the 30th and 31st of March for a 2-day visit, and again suggesting that the committee might want to consider accompanying the Minister on this trip. Certainly on those dates I wouldn't be available, but that's just me. I would imagine there that the committee, obviously we haven't resumed our work on the social housing programme other than taking briefings from the department periodically. And I would imagine that any such visits, this was the view that the committee had taken before, any such visits, because there were some suggestions of going to Scotland as well and other places, that we might want to consider such visits in the context of a programme of work around social housing programme. Okay. In your table item folder, the department has advised that Will Hare has retired and Andrew Hamilton has taken over the post of permanent secretary. Okay,
Is that permanently taken over the post, or is that interim?
I think it's temporary. I think it's temporary.
Mr. Chairman, I noticed that the heading of the letter of the 4th of March is permanent secretary change. Andrew Hamilton was a permanent secretary.
He is the permanent
Please, he
secretary.
is a permanent secretary.
Acting.
You know what I mean?
All right, it's an interim permanent secretary. Is that?
Okay, so in item 5, this is human rights. That's it, you're putting your sort of emphasis on the word permanent. Okay, so it's human rights of the carer. This is a briefing from the Human Rights Commission on Carers NI. I'd like to invite then the Les Allenby, Colin Cahay, John McCormick and Mary O'Neill to the committee this morning. You're all very welcome. You'll find the papers relevant to this on page 17 of your pack.
Chair, thank you, and nice to be back in familiar surroundings, wearing a slightly less familiar hat. What we intended to do this morning was to ask everyone to introduce themselves briefly. I will set some of the context of the report, some of the things that we think are key for the Social Development Committee, although the report ranges much wider than that, and then to ask John McCormick from Carers NI and Mary O'Neill to say, and then we'll take Q&A if that's okay with the committee. I'll just go with people to introduce themselves rather than me, but I'm Les Allenby, now Chief Commissioner of the Human Rights Commission.
I'm John McCormick. I'm Communication Officer with Carers NI.
I'm Mary O'Neill. I'm a carer and I represent carers in the Derry Londonderry area.
Colin Cackey, I'm the policy lead at the Human Rights Commission.
Okay, if I can kick off. We were delighted to do this piece of work as a commission, and we work very closely with Carers NI and its members. So the report and many of its recommendations actually reflect what carers' views were and what their needs are. And it's what I would call a kind of mantra that I hope to have as part of the Commission is what I'll call applied human rights or practical human rights, and to show the importance of human rights in practice. The background to the research is that we have at least 214,000 carers in Northern Ireland providing unpaid care. That's almost 1 in 8 people in our population. Almost 120,000 of those are in work, so over 50% of the carers are doing some work as well as providing care. The value of unpaid care, as estimated by Leeds University in 2011, part of a UK-wide study, was that the value of the care is around £4.4 billion. And it's clear, given the demographics and an increasing older population, that figure is likely to rise rather than fall. 1 in 5 carers give up work to care, and many others have to adjust for their working hours. Carers, we know, are more likely to suffer ill health than their counterparts who don't have to provide care. The Life and Times survey in 2011 of carers showed that 1 in 5 carers feel under pressure almost all of the time, and around 40% of carers feel under pressure most of the time. So there are very significant challenges for those people who provide care. But we recognise that caring is also a rewarding and a valuable and important experience. So it's a context that I think is important. And the final kind of opening remark before we look at the report, I think, is that carers are not a homogenous group. Every carer is an individual with his or her own significant needs. And one of the things that this report is very clear about is that caring, you've got significant numbers of child carers, often forgotten when we look at kind of caring. We've got the very elderly looking after older people. I know from my background in the Law Centre, when we did campaigns around the severe disability premium, we actually found a lot of people in their 90s who were providing care for sons or daughters in their 70s or siblings, younger siblings. So our notion of a carer of being of a certain age and automatically of a certain gender isn't strictly the case. Care can also be a whole life activity. So if a child is born with a congenital disability, then caring may well be lifelong, and that means very specific needs for that group of carers. It can be permanent from a certain age, it can be temporary, it can be intermittent, and therefore we need to recognise that caring is not carers are not a homogenous block. There are no systematic human rights treaties or approaches to caring, but there are a number of important human rights standards. Article 8 of the European Convention on the Right to Family and Private Life, and I'll come back to that in a second. The ISESCA Treaty about the rights to an adequate standard of living are clearly important. The Children's Rights Convention and the right of a child's standard of living to meet physical, mental and development, spiritual and moral needs is important. And the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, particularly Article 28, which states that states must provide support for persons with disabilities and their families, are all relevant. It's interesting that the CRPD has actually been recognised in the new Care Act. England and Wales has a Care Act which will be coming into force on the 1st of April 2015. It consolidates adult social care legislation. It gives carers individually enforceable rights to meet their eligible needs, and it recognises a duty or a general kind of duty on local authorities in England and Wales to promote an individual's well-being. So, and part of the guidance around that takes the key components of independent living from the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. So there are things happening in England and Wales that would be very positive, frankly, if they happened here. Our findings, and I'm going to just cover the key ones, I think, for DSD, but they do range much broader than that. One is about a greater take-up of benefit entitlement, particularly carers allowance, and work that could be done by the department, and recognise the department has done considerably positive work around benefit take-up, but we think some specific work about carers would be particularly useful. A link, and this I think is an important one, which we would ask the committee perhaps to consider writing to both Minister Storey and Minister Wells, and that's about providing a link between carers allowance renewal and carers allowance claims and the right to a carers assessment. You'll hear from my colleagues about the difficulties and lack of understanding about your right to have an assessment of care. Well, one of the ways you could do that very simply, wouldn't frankly cost any money, is simply to make sure that every time you renew your carers assessment annually, you get something that reminds you that you're entitled to a carers assessment and how you can go about doing that. And that's one thing that we think would be simple, straightforward, not resource intensive, and could be done relatively quickly. The need to look at the question of what will happen now in welfare reform and carers. We know that we've 5 funds, and we'll be very interested to see what are in those funds and the details. But one of the things we think is important is in terms of what happens to carers. Because if there is a transition from DLA to PIP, if significant numbers of people come off PIP, and I recognise that it's early days in England and Wales, but the attrition rate of people coming off DLA to PIP is less than was originally anticipated. We'll wait and see what happens in Northern Ireland. But not only do you then, the person with a disability, lose an income, the carer's allowance goes, and under universal credit, losing carer's allowance means you lose carer's element when you come to assess your universal credit. It means increased conditionality for work, and it has some ramifications for when you look for support with childcare. So the carers and carers allowance and its attachment to PIP, as well as the DLA, becomes really important, and therefore we think in these funds we'd like to make sure the committee looks at that issue in particular. Carers allowance is covered in the benefit cap. We'll wait and see what happens with the benefit cap, but again, we do think it's difficult to justify if somebody is providing full-time care and saving the state that they should face the benefit cap. So those are kind of the key recommendations that I think are DSD focused, and we'd like you to look at that. I'll maybe pass you then to John and then to Mary.
Thank you, Les. And thank you. Okay, Chair. Yes, Les has set out quite nicely how many carers there are in Northern Ireland, and it's a massive population. I'll maybe just paint a picture of what caring is all about. You will all be experts already. You'll know somebody in your family who's maybe a carer. Maybe you have caring responsibility yourself. But caring is such an important part of life. It's simply part of being human. Carers hold families together. They enable their loved ones to get the most out of life. And they make an enormous contribution to society, saving the economy billions of pounds. As Les has suggested, if all of carers gave up caring tomorrow, the state would have to find £4.4 billion to replace that care every year. Fortunately, they're not going to do that, because at the end of the day, it's important to remember that carers always put their loved ones first, so they can often be forgotten themselves. Carers want, we want the best possible supports for the people we look after, little regard for our own health and well-being. Yet so many of us are stretched to the limit, juggling work with family life, or even struggling with poor health ourselves. We often find it difficult to make ends meet if we're unable to work, or if we've reduced our working hours to care. Caring, as Les said, isn't a homogenous thing. For some people it's a sudden experience. Someone that you love is taken ill or has an accident, or perhaps your child is born with a disability, leaving you with a lifelong commitment. For others, caring can creep up on you unnoticed. For example, your parents might not be able to manage on their own any longer, or your partner's health gets steadily worse. Without the right support, caring can have a catastrophic impact on your health, your relationships and your income. And that's why this Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission report is so welcome, as it puts carers' rights and needs at the forefront. But the argument for supporting carers, I think, isn't purely an economic one, although that's huge. It's also a moral one. Carers need support and recognition for the huge contribution to society, and Mary's going to give you a picture of her life as a carer. But I'll maybe put forward a few examples, perhaps. Carers have a real fear that they're going to lose out under welfare reform. Take, for example, bedroom tax. I know it's perhaps been done to death in many places, and it's easy to think it's been taken care of. But the experience from our colleagues in England has been that for carers who have a shortfall in their rent due to the introduction of the spare room subsidy or bedroom tax, whatever you prefer to call it, the discretionary housing payments are they're a temporary arrangement. They're only going to be for a limited period of time, and we'd like to think that carers could be considered, when the new measures are brought in, that a DHP perhaps might automatically be paid to a carer, with the understanding that they do have a need for perhaps more rooms. I'll give you an example. So say perhaps that your partner has an illness or a disability that means that they can't share a room with you. That second bedroom is not a spare one. It's going to be needed, and there could be associated equipment that goes with disability that could take up another box room. Again, it's easy to think that people have lots of spare rooms. That's not the case for so many. Another thing that is problematic is the rate of carers allowance. Les has alluded to it. It's only £61.35 a week, irrespective of the number of people you're looking after. So we tend to think of caring as a one-to-one relationship, but actually that's probably quite infrequent. quite often there are a number of disabled children within a family, for example, or it could be part of what we term the sandwich generation, where you might be looking after a disabled child of your own, but actually you're looking after an elderly parent at the same time. So you're kind of caught between two sets of responsibility. We kind of feel that the rate of carers allowance doesn't cover it. Carers needs assessment that Les alluded to. We like a suggestion that if someone applies for carers allowance, that they're informed about their right to an assessment. Because quite often carers don't know that there are practical supports out there that Health and Social Care Trust can carry out an assessment of what the practical everyday support that could be put in place to help a carer in their caring role. Sometimes that's extra support for the disabled person, but actually it could be counselling, for example, if people are stressed out and need to talk to someone. So carers assessments are very, very important, but I know that's not responsibility of DSD, but if you can use your influence with health to encourage the consistent use of carers assessments, so that anyone who reports as being a carer, that they're told about carers assessments and told what they can do. I mean, a lot of people are a little fearful about the word assessment, for example. It sounds like, oh, it's some ridiculous test of their ability to care, so they may be reluctant to come forward, but actually it could be the lifeline to them getting any kind of support whatsoever. And I'll come up here and pass over to Mary to give her some more of her own experience.
My name's Mary O'Neill, and I'm actually the carer of a beautiful 26-year-old daughter, Shauna, who has cerebral palsy and severe learning disability. I also work closely with our two local schools who have merged now, pardon me, our two special schools, Ardnashee School and College, and the carers within that group, and I'm also a committee member on Carers NI. And my whole thing over the last few years has been looking after the needs of carers, because 7 years ago I took critically ill myself and was in the Royal for 7 weeks. And it was put down to pure stress of caring and let myself go so far that I needed help to bring myself back. So I realised that at the minute there are two huge issues facing carers. One is respite, and I'm sure you are all aware of the campaign that's going on at the minute. And the other is finance. And at the minute, we are finding financial worries for carers are at the fore. I did a quick survey around the school last week, and in relation to carers assessments and finance and respite, and 80% of our carers never had a carers assessment. Our carers, before Christmas, I became involved with the Londonderry Rotary Club and the food bank. Because we identified a need within the school of carers who are letting themselves go, basically, because they cannot afford to put food on the table. I know myself, my daughter's incontinent. I use my tumble dryer twice a day on a daily basis. My electric bill will be sky high, and I get £61.35 a week. My husband worked. He then had to come out of his work to care for his mother with Alzheimer's, so again, he gets £61.35 a week, and it's topped up with income support. We find we struggle, and I mean we definitely struggle on a weekly basis to pay our mortgage, to make sure that everything is in place. But we're lucky in that, you know, we seen it coming and we were able to kind of budget a bit for it. But I'm working with families, and I give an example to my colleagues here of one single parent within the Londonderry area with 4 children with disabilities, also caring for her mother with Alzheimer's. She gets £61.35 a week topped up with her income support. Before Christmas, she hadn't even got the food to put on her table or the clothes for her children's backs. So we had to literally try and get as much support as we could. She's never had a carers assessment. She got her carers assessment done, and she has been offered 3 hours a week respite in Omagh for one of her children, one at a time. So it means that that's 4 trips to Omagh. She could not ever afford either the petrol, the tax in the car. You know, nobody sees those hidden costs that we as a family. I need constant heat because if my daughter gets a cold, she doesn't realise she can breathe through her mouth as well as her nose. Everybody takes it for granted. She chokes constantly. I have to have the heat on. I mean, my bills during the winter are astronomical. I don't know how people with 4 and 5 and looking after other people are doing it, because I just couldn't cope. So the need, you know, the colleagues have alluded to carers assessment, but if carers aren't identified and don't have key workers, they don't have access to carers assessment, therefore they don't have any access to services. So they are really at a miss, and the carers allowance element really needs to be taken into consideration with the welfare reform. That is the major worry of our carers at the minute. I think, you know, as a carer myself, I have enough worries. I'm getting older, my daughter's getting older. You know, I'm thinking about the future for her and trying to make future planning for her. Where's she going to live when something happens to us? The chances are we're going to die younger because of our caring responsibilities. Unfortunately, that is reality. So what's going to happen there? And if we can't even save or make provision for the future, you know, I think the Assembly needs to take into consideration just how much we actually do save the government, you know, and how much it actually does cost us in reality on the ground to do our caring role, and why we did a survey last year around various groups of carers, and 80% of them were on antidepressants. How much is that costing our health department a year? Instead of maybe doing something to help alleviate the stress that's not going to cause health problems. I'm on medication. I'll be on medication for life because I took so ill. I don't want to be costing the government for my medication, but I know without it I can't cope. You know, so we need to be taking into consideration that when our younger carers are coming into the system, we make sure that, as Les says, when they are applying for their carers allowance, they're told, they're explained, not only told that they can, it's explained how it will benefit them, and not in a, you know, a meaningful way, in a way that there will be a reality following it. You know, so I don't really want to keep these, but it's just, you know, and I'm sure most of you have a caring role or know somebody with a caring role, and you know that it's not an easy job. I wouldn't give it up for the world, because I absolutely adore my girl to bits. I could kill her at times, but I absolutely adore. But it's really, really difficult, and I'm just finding as I get older, my husband gets older, and I only have one other daughter, and she has a family, and she lives away from home. And, you know, she feels now that she's going to have the responsibility of, you know, she automatically wants the responsibility, but that's not what I want. But if I had the finances in place to be able to provide for a future for my daughter, if I had the regular amount of money coming in that I am saving the government, you know, if I put my daughter into a home tomorrow, the cheapest home that you will find for her is £800 a week. £800 a week, and I get £61.35. You know, there's not a great deal of fairness in that, and I think that when the Assembly's looking at the welfare reform, if you try to ensure that carers are not going to be disadvantaged, you know, we're disadvantaged enough, I think, and I don't think we really need to be, you know, targeted anymore. And I think if you have influence over your health colleagues, they actually just say, you know, reality, this is costing our Assembly a lot more because of the fact that we're not doing enough. You know, thank you.
Right, thank you. You looking on there or no?
No.
Okay. Right, Colin, thank you. Mickey Brady?
Yeah, thanks very much for the presentation. Congratulate Les on his new post. I think in many ways you're preaching the converted, because the history of carers has been appalling in terms of statutory provision. And if you consider prior to 1984, married women couldn't get invalid care allowance, that had to be a court case. There's always been an argument that carers allowance, meagre though it is, should be a standalone benefit because it's so inextricably linked to the LA or attendance allowance. So there's never any rationale. And I know when the Drake case happened in 1984, we were told by the department at that time that it would be a standalone benefit. But as the woman was actually flying back from Europe, I think they changed the rules to ensure that it wasn't. And if you consider carers save about £3 billion a year probably. That's the estimate we've been given in terms of statutory provision. It's interesting because today we have a regulation which will increase the earnings limit from £102 to £110, which again is not very helpful, because if you're a carer, in many cases you can't work. It's as simple as that. So something needs to be addressed. I know David McNary and myself had done some work a couple of years ago in terms of trying to make it a standalone benefit. And he was concentrating on pensioners, but it just wasn't feasible at that particular time. So, and the other thing too is, of course, that carers allowance is now portrayed as some sort of a substitute for wages, which is it works out about a quarter of the minimum wage. So, I mean, the whole situation is totally ridiculous. It's interesting you mentioned the carers assessment, because the vast majority, there's a very strong carers group in Uri, in my own constituency, and there's a young carers group. And people aren't always aware. There's kids as young as 9, 10, 11 are almost permanent carers, either before they go to school, after school, during the night. That is often not recognised. So there's all sorts of issues around that. But in terms of the health aspect and the carers assessment, Paul and I both sit on the health committee. So obviously that's something we can certainly bring to the both ministers. But you know, in terms of carers, they're so badly treated, in my view, and they're so isolated in many ways. Because for carers to actually go to meetings about their situation, they have to then get somebody to look after the person that they're caring for. So it becomes almost impossible. So they become so isolated, and unfortunately, it's only carers groups like some of you represent that actually is of any benefit, because certainly the statutory provision is appalling. And you know, in terms of the welfare reform in inverted commas, I think it's very clear that one of the reasons that it was delayed and that we were opposed it was to ensure that vulnerable people like carers were protected. And obviously there's a supplementary payment from that needs to be very clearly looked at to ensure that people in your position do not lose out. As has been mentioned in terms of the bedroom tax and other things, which is not coming in. People would say it's coming in the future, but at this point in time it's not. But people need to be protected, and people in your situation, because respite's non-existent, virtually non-existent. The statutory authorities pay lip service to it, in my view. But that's my rant over about carers. But I think, you know, it's a genuine concern that so many people are carers and so many people are being ignored.
I'd make one quick observation. It was from something that Mary said in her evidence, which was that large numbers of people in Derry, Londonderry were not claiming their, were not seeking a carers assessment because they didn't have a key worker. Well, of course, you don't have to have a key worker to get a carers assessment. But if that's what people think out there, then one of the important things about when you get your carers allowance, you get something that tells you about a carers assessment. It can tell you very quickly what you're entitled to be assessed for. You don't have to have a social worker before you seek a carers assessment. So there are clearly, if you like, misinformed misunderstandings about the carers assessment and its process. But that's one way that would be very easy to reach people and wouldn't cost a great deal of money. So that seems to me to be a really quick win. Two ministers, both from the same political party. I can't believe either of them would find it difficult to sign up to this kind of approach. Now, it does mean that more people will be assessed about their needs, but that, it seems to me, and is in a time when the Compton Review, and we know that kind of where a lot of the public expenditure difficulties at the moment are on the social care side as much as the healthcare side, but it means that the reality of just what is needed, it will become much more apparent. So for us, that is a really important and potentially quite significant quick win that could be made by two government departments.
Just make 2 points. I mean, in terms of the carers assessment, sometimes even there is a social worker, there's a disconnect there. People aren't necessarily informed. The other thing is there was some hope, I think, for carers in transforming your care. The recommendations originally came out, obviously, to shift left and put more money into social care in the community, and that might have given carers, but that just hasn't happened. And if you had that infrastructure in place, then it may give carers a much better opportunity for respite, for actual help with caring and indeed assessments.
It's really interesting with Commission is in the middle of a piece of work around a human rights inquiry into healthcare in the emergency department. One of the things we looked at has been where has the transition money gone, and it has been spent, but it's been spent on a very important issue, which is to get long-term residents in mental health institutions into the community. And that's a really important issue, but it wasn't what the transition monies was designed for. It was a much broader fund designed to bridge the gap between moving from money predominantly in kind of healthcare to a much more preventative strategy of step-down care. And the money has been shifted aside to a specific portion of that, not the more general issue. So it's clear to us that, you know, and the Liam Donaldson report was pretty clear, you need to kind of put rocket boosters on the Compton report to make it happen. And that's not going to be easy in the current climate, but actually social care is a really, I mean, the displacement costs that Mary outlined of her own ill health, you know, that's the kind of issue that happens. If you don't spend money in one place, it nearly always ends up spending more money somewhere else, and that doesn't make...
But there's one thing getting people back in the community, the other issue is keeping them in the community, providing the proper infrastructure to ensure that it was worthwhile in the first place, you know, because that's part of the whole issue around transforming care. It just hasn't happened. I mean, the Royal College of Nursing on the Health Committee, when they gave us a briefing, described it as a vision without action. I think that's probably the best description so far.
Okay, Paula?
Thank you, and again, congratulations, Les. It's good to see you back again. I have to say, the majority, and perhaps not all of what Michael said, absolutely agree with. I think that we have done a great disservice over the years to our carers, and I know as someone who came from a social work background, who did do carers assessments or did refer people on, I was hospital social worker, but referred people on for in the community for assessments. I know how they were stalled a lot of the time. I know because of workloads that the social workers had, amount of clients on their books, the work they had to do, that quite often people were missed out, and they were missed out. And as Mickey says, him and I both said on the Health Committee, it's something that needs to be addressed. But I think we need to hone in on our carers assessments too, because reading the points in this of people who have had carers assessments, they have felt that they didn't do them any, there was no service there at all. They got very little out of it. They didn't get to see it, which I don't understand either, because you should have a copy of that. You get a copy of all of those things. I would have given a copy of that to anyone I did a carers assessment on. And, you know, it's just quite interesting, all of the comments about it. So maybe through Health and through Mickey and myself, we need to then look at honing in on the carers assessment. What is it actually for? What is it actually to do? And what is it actually to achieve? Because I know in a lot of cases, and I've seen one of them there, a lot of the times the care assessment, all it came out with was unmet need. And that was it, you know, and it didn't change from one carers assessment to the next carers assessment. So I absolutely agree with the points to do with TYC and to do with the Donaldson report. And, you know, there's a lot of loose ends that need tied together. Do you have any, maybe in here somewhere less, the actual percentage of people that get a carers assessment who are known to social services?
You can actually get that. There's an annual audit within each trust area, and you can get it. And I know our Western Trust, again, is the lowest and in the uptick of carers assessment. But again, as you pointed out, Paula, the lack of key workers on the ground, then to actually get your carers assessment done, it takes time. Carers don't have a lot of time, you know, either to sit down and answer these questions, especially when they know that, you know, there's no services at the end of it. There's no, I mean, the campaign that I'm running at the minute with parents is to stop our local respite units closing down. You know, they want our parents, you know, to take a cut in respite services. Those parents are at their wits' end because they can't afford their own health to go down any further. And, you know, it's the whole, there has to be a joint up thinking between the two departments. Hold on a minute here, you know, do we want it to cost us more in the long run, or will we try and fix it now? You know, what do they do? And you will find that if you ask a carer on the ground, they're not asking for a lot. They are not asking for a lot. I give 5 hours a week direct payments, and I love it. I absolutely love it. That's my 5 hours, and that's my, I don't want any more.
You have to fight for that as well.
And only I took so well, I wouldn't have got it. You know, that was the only reason that I got it, because my husband was running up and down to the Royal we were paying carers to come in to look after my daughter, for him to visit me. He had to stop visiting me because we couldn't afford to pay the carer coming in. So eventually I got 5 hours direct payments for him to visit me. So, you know, that's the kind of problems. And it's not a lot. We're not asking for a lot.
And direct payments can be very good and can work very well.
They can work extremely well.
But a lot of people don't know about those either.
But direct payments, but there's a need. And I always say, you know, one size doesn't fit all in care. There's a need for traditional forms of respite. There's a need for alternative forms of respite. Just ask the carer what they need. You know, but remember that I always say the analogy is that if the child goes into a special school, there's a carer there somewhere. If a person takes Alzheimer's, there's a carer there somewhere. You know, there is a carer at the bottom of all this. And because, you know, my Shauna fell into the bracket where we weren't realised as carers because we were married women until, you know, 1984. She fell into that bracket. But again, you're not recognised as a carer until they're nearly 3.5, 4. Because, well, that's your duty anyway as a mother. But you might have 7 hospital appointments a week that you have to pay for. You know, people don't realise that the travel costs involved with caring, your hospital appointments, the time that you have to take out to go to those hospital appointments. If you have other family members, how do you get them looked after? You know, there's a wider issue here. It's, you know, and as your colleagues have alluded to, it's that carers just aren't being recognised.
And then there's the other issue also, and I'm sure you would agree, of the amount of carers. And there are a massive amount, it could be any one of us in this room, that look after parents that have no social work involvement, but still have caring responsibilities they have to do when they finish work at whatever time. Then they're going to do whatever it is they have to do, light the fire, feed their parent, do whatever. And they're totally, and a lot of them, you know, cannot claim anything.
Yeah.
And they're working over and above their normal working day to care for members of their family. And I mean, they have no mission of getting a carers assessment, as you say, because they're not known to anybody. So, yeah, I agree that there should be something about carers assessment, but I think we need to look at the carers assessment as well and fine-tune that a little bit more as to what the outcomes of that are. And there's bound to be, I don't know, are there protocols? There are bound to be procedures and protocols in place that after a carers assessment is done, this is what the trust have to do.
They are there, but I think they're under the blanket with everybody else when they're sleeping.
I mean, I'm not blaming social workers, because I know what it's like to have a workload that you can't that you work to 7 or 8 every night. You only get paid to 5. You know, you're maybe coming into work on a Saturday morning to do your write-ups. You're not getting paid for it. I know what the pressures that they're under.
And then the other side of that is that we're finding is our carers are saying, but my social worker's off in the sick again. Because there's so much pressure put on our social workers to perform a job under extreme circumstances that they can't deliver. Then they're given such high caseloads, you know, that they can't cope mentally and physically. They can't cope, so they're going off in the sick. Then it's not their fault. You know, we never blame them, and I always say to our carers, never take it out on the person that's coming to your door, because that's not the person that's pulling the strings. You know.
No, look, thank you. I think that's again another, like the one we had last week, that Health Committee definitely need to take up that part of it. No doubt about it.
Two very quick comments, and Sean might want to come in too. There are figures, the department releases them. I don't have them with me, but I can get them to the committee, and they do release, I actually think they release them quarterly across Northern Ireland, but they certainly release them annually, and I've seen them relatively recently, so there are up-to-date figures on the numbers of carers assessment. And the other interesting thing, I think, is that the Care Act that I was alluding to that comes in England and Wales on the 1st of April 2015 has a set of regulations that sets out on a statutory basis how carers assessment should be done, and it includes that they should be in writing and should be given to the person. We don't have that equivalent now. Best practice would suggest that you should both commit it to writing, both internally and provide it. But there's no requirement.
I'm nearly certain at this stage, and sorry for butting in again, that the client has to sign the carers assessment. Do they not?
You're supposed to sign the carers assessment.
So therefore, you would see. I know I'm only going, and it's been what 4 years since I worked in social services, so memory's not that good. But I'm nearly certain it was.
You are supposed to sign it, but you'll find a lot of cases that the carer never gets. They sign it, never sees it.
Practically, a lot of people don't even realise they've had an assessment or they're having one.
And they should be told.
Yeah, it's just it's an informal chat somehow, and they don't realise they've had a carer's assessment.
That's my experience, which is almost social workers would prefer to do a kind of, almost informal discussion than commit something to paper, because that often means committing to paper the unmet need as well. Because if you do it properly,
That's equally important, and that's equally important for us as well.
And we don't
to know the unmet need.
Any record of the level of unmet need, which would be a very useful
Absolutely.
piece of information, frankly, for policymakers and planners and providers to have. And we need to find a way in which, and the report makes reference to this, about how we actually properly audit both how much care is being provided and supported by public authorities and others, and how much actually can't be, so that we can actually have a proper debate about what the need really is out there. And at the moment, we can't have that meaningful debate with some meaningful figures.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Dolores?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Can I just pick up on the point about respite care and the offer several miles away, which really I don't think was a real meaningful offer at all, and whether or not the Human Rights Commission then can intervene on the basis of the right to family and private life in such cases?
Yeah, well, the short answer is yes, we certainly could look at it, because I can't believe for a second that, I'm assuming that the President alluded, you live in Derry/Londonderry, that there can't be a service, frankly, nearer than Omer. It does seem to me to be remarkable that unless the, frankly, service needed is such a specialist service that you could make some kind of case that can't be provided, locally, it seems bizarre to me that respite care has to be provided a long way from the point of where the person is. And if you had the proper participative mechanisms in kind of what you need, then it would be very clear. There's no point in providing a service that you can't access. So that's a rather long-winded way of saying yes. So yes, that's the kind of issue we should be looking at.
Well, certainly I would encourage you to do that, given that there are currently statutory reviews of daycare and residential care, which will be very problematic for the carers in general. And there will be added pressures on DEL, for example, to pick up some of the slack, particularly with those over the age of 16, who will be leaving school and then anticipating getting into formal daycare, which won't be there or in any reasonable form. So I would encourage you to come up. Thank you, Chair.
Right, Dolores, thank you. Stuart?
Thank you, Chair. And again, thank you very much for the presentation and for highlighting both as a constituency MLA the issue which I deal with when people come to see me, but also from a personal perspective. We've all either been through or are currently involved in personal care in all of the circumstances that are set out. We have neighbours and we have friends as well. My concern is twofold. One, how do you get the information out there to people who are caring? I can understand, for example, if perhaps it's with a child with a specific illness, then perhaps right from the beginning you will be involved perhaps with an organisation or a charity that deals with that, and they will provide a lot of information. At the other end of the scale, you will have the unknowns, the people who either don't want you to know, or they simply don't know themselves. And it's how we get that information out there is important. I'm just, for example, looking at the NI Direct website, which, on Carers Alliance is nothing short of useless. I've just gone round and round in circles, and it's taken me the best part of this meeting to actually discover how I can download a claim form. It's not on the front page, it's not on the second page, and it's not actually on the third page. It seems as if government really doesn't want to tell you what's happening in respect of that. So my question to you is, how can you help us and so that we can encourage others, both health and DSD, to make sure that in all our communications with people that we get that information out there. Then, without going into a lot of detail, I do appreciate all of the complexities of dealing with people who are carers and trying to signpost them to the appropriate support, and then quite often arguing about the lack of that support.
Can I come on there, Stuart, and just say that, for me, your first point of contact for any care is their GP. Because for you to become a carer, your GP has to have either seen the person that you're caring for, or if it's a dementia, if it's a specific illness, your GP is your first point of contact. So there should be some kind of mechanism that the GPs are able to tap in and say, right, there's a carer here.
And how many of them are actually asking that question of themselves and then putting that question to their patients?
I've
In other
never been
words,
asked it.
I recognise that so-and-so has brought their mum or father here
Were
on
they a carer?
X number of occasions. So, you know what, I actually think that person's a carer, and I or somebody in the practice needs to have that conversation with them.
We always say as parents that, you know, that is the first person who should pick up that you're a carer. You know, if you're coming with your child on a regular basis and your child's having numerous hospital appointments, you're a carer.
Yeah, actually, it is part of the GP contract to identify carers. Some practices are very good, some aren't. And we will get referrals. To
And
our
how is that assessed as part of their contract? Apologies, Chair.
I'm not sure of the detail of that, to be honest, but I know, I presume they will have to make some kind of return to the department. I don't know whether that's a head count of how many carers have been referred.
I appreciate it's a health issue, and perhaps Paula and take that issue up for us. Thank you.
One concern we identified in the research was that GPs, although incentivised to register, carers weren't incentivised to keep the information up to date and to be more proactive in gathering that information.
Thank you.
When you say incentivised, what do you mean by that?
Within the contract, so it's really
part of the
really
payment again?
Paid
money.
Okay, thank you for that. Roy, Sammy, and then Jim.
Again, thank you for your presentation and highlighting the importance of having joined up government. You know, the GP can perhaps spot who needs assistance from carers allowance or carers assessment. Those who have received carers allowance from DSD, again, this idea of carers assessment, that they should be made aware that it exists and be able to draw down on it. And this is going to be an increasingly important area with this transforming your care concept of care in the community. More and more people having to be looked after in the community, and of course we have the ageing population. But I just want to focus in on the experience of the mother who was offered 3 hours respite, some considerable distance away, and literally couldn't afford the additional expense in travelling there to avail of it. Is there no recourse to explain whether or not what's been offered is of any practical assistance to a family? I mean, I can't understand if something's been offered, why something should be offered which will not work for a family, that it's just left at that, and oh, you're not taking it up your offer, that's it, tick the box, we've offered it. Surely is there not an ongoing dialogue to try and see what assistance can be provided so that ultimately, potentially, catastrophic breakdowns happen and people can be required to go into long-term care and the £800 a week and family breakdown occur so that family units can stay together and look after each other?
A lot of carers will think that the offer that's made to them is all they can get, so they're not really prepared to challenge that, and they don't know about challenge mechanisms or complaints processes or whatever. You know, they're really quite unaware of those things.
They don't have the energy to go through that. You know, and I mean, I've just started a campaign, well, we've started a campaign in our local carers group to try and save our local respite unit, because our carers are being asked, and Greg, I'm sure you're well aware of this one, they're being asked to travel 40 miles away. The more severely complex medical needs are being asked to travel from Omagh to Derry for their respite, Derry to Omagh for non-medical needs. And, you know, it doesn't make sense, but they were bringing this in, and only as a campaign we set it up, you know, no, hold on a minute, you can't do this. That they have now had to stop and take a wee bit of reflection and say, well, maybe we need a consultation. There was no consultation, even in compliance with the law 2012, involvement of carers. They didn't engage carers in any consultation. They just came in and told parents, take it or leave it. That's what our parents were told on the ground. Take it or leave it. We can give you 3 hours in Omagh. Take it or leave it. That parent would have had to go 4 times a week for 4 different days respite. We can't take the 4 of them all at the one time because it's a mixture of boys and girls.
There's a very interesting dichotomy and different mindset between, for example, social security benefits. If you apply for disability living allowance and you're turned down, and there's a statutory right of appeal, people understand and will exercise that right of appeal. My experience of social care, where there's not there are mechanisms, internal reviews, ultimately there's the ombudsman, etc., etc. But my experience is that that's rarely utilised by carers partly because I don't think they understand what the process is. It's not that clear to people. And partly, I think, as carers are not the most forceful group of people, I don't want to homogenise them, and therefore it almost takes an intervention of a third party. You need to go to a law centre or an independent advice centre or Carers NI or CAB to actually start to get a change. And most carers will, A, not have the time and often don't have the inclination to do that. So there's a very different approach to kind of social security benefits and social care entitlements. And some of those social care provision is an entitlement. If you are assessed as having an eligible need, then the duty is to try and find a way of meeting that need. It's not enough to just identify it. It's then about meeting it.
Les, I think, has made a very useful point there in that the pressures that are on carers, and even just in terms of their time to get freed up to go and have an appointment with CAB or someone to try and seek, and it's actually important that there is good online information available, because they may be able to stay in their own home and they might be able to access this, but that may even be a problem as well. But at least I think it's important that from this committee's point of view, we should be ensuring that there is good online information available for those who are able to access it to draw down support.
I think a lot of the discussion is highlighting the fact that carers aren't recognised by statutory bodies in the main, or they're recognised in quite a limited way, but also carers don't recognise themselves or don't recognise what they're doing as caring. You know, it's just part and parcel of your everyday life. You know, I'm a husband, I'm a wife, I'm a mum, daughter, whatever. You just do it and get on with it, and mostly uncomplaining. And you know, there are struggles, and it's only when the breakdown happens that people suddenly realise, oh, hang on, this is not just being a parent. It's a caring role. You know, it is the role of a health professional quite often. So I think there's an onus on everyone really to lead an awareness campaign of some sort. You know. So.
Just one final point: have you picked up a reduction of respite offers generally? Because I know I had been contacted myself by some constituents who basically had the respite halved.
People have a sense that they're entitled to a certain amount of respite per year. You know, we get. Exactly, and people aren't entitled to a certain amount. The amount of respite you get is based on your assessed need, and that's obviously on an individual basis. So, you know, somebody could be getting 8 weeks respite. I'm sure that's not happening very often, but and then other carers are pointing and going, oh, that person got that, you know, and think it's an entitled amount. You know, they don't realise they've been assessed.
But even, sorry, can I just come on? Even when you've got an assessed need, I mean, a lot of our carers in our constituency, they have either over the past few years had an assessed need, had either direct payments implemented, or were given X amount of hours or X amount of weeks, you know, or days within a certain amount of time. It's normally 3 days within a 6-week period. I mean, again, that was cut and cut, and because of reviews, a lot of our carers have lost any of their direct payments. They've lost their hours respite. Our respite hours are being cut by 70% in our constituency in the northern sector and 50% in the southern sector because of the respite, because of implementations, and because what the Trust say, lack of funding. You know, and I've sat at meetings over the past 6 weeks, and it is really difficult to go to meetings. I mean, for example, this morning I had to come up here on the 7 o'clock bus. My husband has a hospital appointment. I've had to get a carer and put my daughter out on a bus to a day centre for me to come back to make sure that, you know, it's crazy. But if somebody doesn't fight the fight for our carers, you know, and I'm getting older, and because I ended up being really ill, there's younger carers out there and there's older carers there. Like we've got a carer in her 80s that's looking after her 50-year-old son, and she doesn't get any respite. You know, there's nobody comes on to say to her, "Are you okay? Do you need anything? Do you need a wee hour out?" You know, and as I say, we're not looking for much, but you know, show us a wee bit of appreciation and a wee bit of understanding.
It's really interesting, and the report illustrated this very, very well. This is a real cross-cutting issue, because one of the issues that came up in the report was children carers and the impact it has on their education if children have to care. So there's an aspect of this that covers both Department of Education and DEL, for example. We've clearly covered DHSS PS today. There's a DSD role in terms of carers allowance, but I don't get a sense of a real joined up integrated thinking about carers. Now, I'm not sure how old the carers strategy is, but it's
2006.
It's 2006, so we're nearly 10 years since we had a carer strategy. At the very least, time to kind of refresh that. And I think what the Human Rights Commission report does is kind of illustrate across government departments how there are niche issues that affect a number of departments, and there is a need for, use the hoary old phrase, joined up thinking here, and perhaps it's time the carer strategy was dusted down and frankly looked at again. And it's not one that comes directly to probably this committee, but again, it's one worth perhaps two representatives on the Health Committee perhaps should remind health officials that it's time that was looked at again.
Can I just ask a question on that, Chair?
Well,
Was it due to expire at any date, or has there been addendums put to it, or has it just, there's no, a lot of the strategies, there's an end date that the strategy has to be completed by. We don't often achieve that, so we get an addendum then put onto it. I'm trying to look it up here.
And a lot of the trust, I mean, although there's certain elements within the care strategy, a lot of it hasn't been implemented.
yeah, because I think it was going to come to that at some point, because you have the care strategy which does date back in 2006, and then all of the trusts then take from that their own individual strategy. But then beyond that, then there's the whole there is an implementation group there designed to actually see that through. So I was going to return that later on, but although it's not specific to this committee, but it is a key issue of importance. Are you happy enough, Paul, at the minute? You've covered that just for now. Sammy and Jim.
I suppose a lot of what we've been talking about this morning actually doesn't refer to this committee at all. It's more health issues. I suppose the two issues here, the spare room subsidy, which I take your point on, but that is an issue which I think that the executive has effectively dealt with. And the second one is a rate of carers allowance, which I'm not so sure that an amendment to the welfare reform bill to upgrade that is the correct way forward. And I really wanted to explore this with you because, listening to what you've said this morning, clearly there are some people whose the intensity of the care that they've got to give, and therefore, you give a very good illustration. The costs will be much higher for some people than for others. And I suppose it would be useful, you mentioned direct payments, but it's useful to see, short of a change in the rate of carers allowance, which would apply to everybody and which I think would be fairly difficult probably to introduce anyhow, are there other financial mechanisms which you've identified that might be used to reflect the cost or the additional costs of care that people have to undertake?
Yeah, I actually sit on the Western Trust steering group. Part of my role is trying to say to them, look, let's look at alternative ways to help carers who have additional. I've got one daughter. That's fine. I have costs, but people who have 2, 3 more costs, more hospital appointments, maybe than what I will have. There's no extra support for them. So I think the one-off cares, one-off care support payments. I think direct payments. I think looking at, I know the rate of carers allowance, and we alluded to young carers. Young carers don't get paid. Right up to they're 18, they're doing that care and role too as well. There's no financial, subsidy for them, even within the family allowance. But I think, looking at alternative modes and seeing that if a family does have more than one caring responsibility, what can the executive do to help them out? Can there not be a top-up payment, to allow them? But then any top-up payment will come off any other benefit that they will receive, such as income support. So, that's the only one that I can get at the minute. And I did tell Les a story coming up about a carer whose daughter lost a kidney. She cares for her grandson. She cares for her grandson who has severe challenging behaviour. I'll not give you too long. Severely challenging behaviour. Her daughter had a kidney transplant, which her husband had given her, donated to her. The kidney started to fail after Christmas, but they realised it wasn't the kidney; it was her pancreas was starting to die. They airlifted her to Scotland. The carer phoned me from Scotland and said, "Is there anything you can do? We can't get respite." I phoned our trust, I phoned emergency out of hours. There's nothing we can do for you. That fella had to sit here in Northern Ireland while his daughter was practically dying in Scotland. The wife was over in Scotland. The son with the grandson with severely challenging behaviour. She's another daughter with cancer who was on the matter having chemotherapy. That was all going on within 1 week, and I could not get one single person to give them as a hand. I had to go to a local charity. I had to go to a food bank. I had to go to our local school, to the principal, and say, right, we need cash here. And we literally had to try and find that. And all they offered that family was Oma. And that father would have had to drive the child to Oma. Now he's a 15-year-old, big stocky boy. 40 miles to Oma, 40 miles back, drive to Belfast, get a flight, go to Scotland, come back from Scotland and be back for 4 o'clock the next day, because that was all the time they could give him. Now, how is that feasible? But there was no emergency top-up payment, no emergency respite. We don't have emergency respite. There was nothing that that family could avail of. Now, the wee girl hasn't died. She's critical. She's been air flown back to Northern Ireland. Her pancreas has died. They're on a critical witness, and that could happen at any time again, that emergency could occur, and yet no, she's been told, well, we can only offer you Oma for a day.
And your story, I suppose, leads me to the second question I was going to ask, because you have outlined ways in which, for example, carers' assessments could be made more known to carers. I mean, whether through GPs doing the job that they're paid for, by the way, already, or through notes that go out, you know, with the carers' benefit payment. But is there not a more fundamental issue? If you do that, and I think you mentioned, Mary, that 80% of people didn't actually get carers assessments. I don't know if that's just in your area or that's...
No, that was just within the new merger of the two schools. We just did a quick survey from there.
Well, I mean, whether that's a picture of what happens across Northern Ireland or not, I mean, certainly it would seem a lot of people aren't getting assessments. Now, if we make it better known, there's a more fundamental issue, not what you've said. You're going to just finish up with a lot of frustrated and disappointed people. That first of all, there's not the capacity within social services to do the assessments, and secondly, if the assessments are done, that people are going to wait, or they'll be assessed, you need this, that or the other thing, but there are not already the resources there to meet the terms of those assessments.
Can I ask, I want to ask the first question as well, which was very quickly, which was about, I have some sympathy with the argument that just simply increasing carers allowance might not be the answer for two reasons. One, it's treated, if you're on another means-tested benefit, then actually the carers allowance increase would only simply take money off. In Mary's case, her income support, she would be no better off. In overlapping benefit rules terms, if you were an older carer and you increased carers allowance, it still will overlap with your retirement pension, and therefore, unless, you know, and if your pension credit rather. So there are sets of issues there that's not a kind of one bound, we're free. There are things you can do in carers allowance that are relatively cost light. If you go to full-time study, you lose your carers allowance. Don't ask me why. I can't see a reason why you couldn't say to a carer, if you want to try and get back into education, you shouldn't be able to do that if you're a full-time carer. It's 35 hours a week. You might be caring at night, etc. The earnings rule, which is £110, it's barely 16 hours at the national minimum wage. You could relax the earnings rule. Wouldn't cost that much. So there are things you can do with carers allowance that are, I think, manageable financially. Where I think the money needs to go in terms of this is probably into social care. If you're going to spend some money, then it ought to go into social care. And then that actually does make, and if the competent review kind of proposals happened, then actually the carers assessment starts to make sense. And even if in the short term there are frustrated carers, if we start to record the unmet need, then we start to have a debate about how we're going to do that. And what happens at the moment is we have a debate by and large about healthcare and hospital waiting times and trolley waits, etc. We don't have a similar debate about social care. It's a kind of hidden, and actually, so therefore, I still think that's worth doing because it actually highlights what I think is a quite significant issue. And if we're going to get real about health and social care being joined up, then that's the way to go.
And I think if you're really genuine about care in the community and transforming your care, you need to have that debate about the unmet need. You need to identify unmet need, and if you can't, identify what you're not meeting, how are you supposed to meet future? I mean, there's a lot of unmet need now at the minute, but I had this argument with our trust last week, and I was told by the manager of the trust, well, there's no point in me going to the commissioners with a business plan because they're going to turn me down. And I says, but your last business plan was 2010. This is 2015. How many more people? We don't know. And we know, because we're looking at them on the ground, and we know how many people haven't had carriage assessments who don't have services. But again, if you don't identify the unmet need, and I know, I can see your argument that if you're going to create all of this unmet need, you're going to have angry carers. You've angry carers anyway because they're being ignored. You know, and they're sitting on the ground and nobody's taking them on. At least even do something that identifies the unmet need so that the commissioners can come back to the Assembly and say, look, folks, you know, we need to be working together here to try and solve this if we are genuine about getting people care in the community. You know, because to me, at the minute, this care in the community is a joke because of the fact that you're looking for me to care for my daughter from cradle to grave, but yet no, you don't want to support me in doing that. You know, and I know she's my daughter and people will try and pull the, you know, the family thing on you. But as I say, at 18, I kicked my other one out to university.
No, I wasn't trying to say, I'm always saying that if we do go down that route, there are consequences for a health budget in particular, and probably debates then about where the priorities lie. And it was the same with the question about the increased carriage allowance. Should that be a priority, or should the priority be to find additional ways of giving support which are more focused than the kind of blanket approach of the carers allowance, which won't necessarily benefit
I think Les is
anyway,
right.
You know.
If we, because I can only earn £110 a week. If I go out now at the minute, I can earn £110 a week. You know, other than that, I lose my carers allowance. So increasing the carers allowance isn't going to, and it's not going to make my life meaningful because I want a part-time job. You know, and I want to be meaningful. I went back to part-time study and did a degree. I want to have to do something with that degree. So increasing my carers allowance wouldn't do anything for me.
The report recommendation, one of them was about looking at a kind of discretionary support fund, which is not that different from what we've got. So one of the things that when we, no doubt will come to this committee, when you look at the discretionary support funds, one of the things to look at is, does it make any kind of reference around caring and carers? That's one way of, if you like, targeting support that might be, again, proportionate in terms of where we are financially. So there are some solutions that are realistic, I think, and doable.
Sorry, Chair, can I just make maybe 2 points in relation to what Sammy said? Because here you mentioned about young carers not getting, but if you're a pensioner, you don't either.
Yeah.
But they do, with this underlying entitlement, which people simply didn't understand. The other thing too about the earnings factor is, if you go 1p over 110 pounds, you lose a lot. There's no graduated scale. That's another way of something. Getting it as a standalone benefit, you know, that it doesn't, it's not means tested, it doesn't affect the same as DLA or retention is. There are other innovative ways of looking at all of this. But a lot of carers are over pension age and they're penalised because they're still doing the caring, but they're not getting any reward. And it's not a reward, I don't think people look at it as a reward, it's to help them actually maintain a particular quality of life and standard of living for them and the people they're looking after. I think that's important.
But Jim and Mickey. Just one quick point. This mightn't be a practical suggestion, but I just want to get your reaction. You've talked about the overlap between the two departments. At the moment, Stormont's about to embark on some form of rationalisation of the number of departments and the functions of departments. Would there be any merit in trying to rationalise carers into one department? Or is that at all practical?
I must confess I hadn't thought about it in terms of a solution to this. What I think might, I mean, I'd have to go away and think about that, and it probably has some difficulties I can immediately foresee. But I wonder whether actually a halfway house that might be, this is very much top of my head stuff, but if actually in government departments at a very senior level you actually started to appoint champions of carers and you started to produce a way in which actually and I know that interdepartmental working groups can sometimes be a kind of dead hand of a kind of inertia, but if you appoint people at a senior enough level that say you've got to deal with these cross-cutting issues, if you then put caring in one committee and said you report to one committee on what you're doing, who then work on there are ways that are perhaps short of having a department of caring.
You don't think you could remove it from being a cross-cutting issue?
I think it would be very hard, for example, if you took something like children as carers. One of the issues is what are the educational needs a young person has if having to provide care? What kind of educational support? Could you put that in one? Could you shift that from education to another department? It's possible, but it's not easy. Is I think.
Nor could you bring welfare out. I mean, if Carers Allowance is part of the welfare system, then you couldn't bring that particularly out of DSD and say, well, that part of welfare looked after by another department. So
I think you have to find champions at very senior level in the department and then hold them to account. In various departments is probably more realistic than trying to draw them all into one place.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Well, I think it's clearly a question for strategies and being implemented. Because at the end of the day, unless you have one department, you're always going to have some bits of something out with a department or another. And it's the kind of point that Sammy's alluding to there. So we do have to find ways of making sure whatever number of departments there might be, that there are joined up initiatives and joined up programmes of work and for which people are then held accountable. No other members indicating to speak. Are there any other final comments any of you want to make? I mean, clearly covered a lot of issues there and illustrated them very, very well and comprehensively. Unfortunately, put them under very difficult circumstances.
I think I would just highlight kind of two recommendations. One is that kind of support fund, and when the support funds come out, look at them through the eyes of a carer, this committee, because I think that will be important. And the second is with talking of champions earlier, if we could have two champions on the committee go across to health and say, why can't we make this happen in terms of carers allowance, tying up with carers assessments? Those would be two small but really useful things that could come out of this morning's session.
I mean, I think there's been a number of very simple, basic ideas which have been floated there, and most of us would think would be quite realistic and reasonable to try to have implemented, and we'll pursue that. I mean, I think, Mary, you made the point yourself that everybody around this table here will have dealt with either family members or friends or constituents who are in these predicaments, unfortunately, and so we are unfortunately well aware of the nuts and bolts of all this, but there are some useful suggestions there, and I would also refer to the department's recent briefing to ourselves, Social Security Agency, around our 3-year plan about reaching to carers and finding new ways of doing that. So this is a live issue clearly for yourself, but I kind of want to assure you that the committee will also have a look at this and see what messages we can take here from this morning, how we can kind of add value to your own lobbying and your own efforts, and do our best on that. And of course, we will clearly link with the health department issue on this as well. I think, as you well described, two champions from the committee, because we actually are, in fairness to both of the members, are focused on these issues routinely. So could I then thank yourselves on that, and then we will sort of take stock of what we've heard this morning and try and follow through on whatever we can do, and we'll keep that dialogue open with yourselves.
And can I be really cheeky and leave you a couple of our leaflets for our campaign? Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary. Thank
I
you.
do.
And good luck with your efforts. Okay, and thanks
thank
very
you.
much. Oh, thanks very much. Sorry.
I'm tempted to say this is the committee, you can be as cheeky as you like, but very that might get into Hansard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Especially when you're just about to leave.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, members. I mean, obviously, if members are content, we will take stock of that and maybe do a wee summary of the meeting this morning, particularly some of the suggestions or proposals, and we can then agree on them in maybe our next meeting or so, if Kevin and I was able to kind of compile a wee list of that, and so we can see how we want to try to progress some of those matters. Fair enough. Okay, members. Moving on then to the next item, which is the Rinmore stock transfer. Again, it was agreed there that we will discuss this matter today as an item on the agenda. I refer you to page 81 of your pack. And obviously you need to consider this in line with the Department's original correspondence of 29th of January. Correspondence of the 18th of February includes a timeline of events, further information on the referral of the matter by the Permanent Secretary, and I own a copy of the Deputy Secretary's internal audit, follow-up, review of correspondence, matters relating to Craig and Estate, Renmore pilot proposal. I will wish to note the final conclusion of the audit report, and that's page 111 of your pack. We also wrote to Brian Roundtree seeking clarification on some of his comments, and we have yet to receive anything from him. He did assure the committee that we would have a response by the 27th of February, but we don't have that. Okay, so just in terms of what you have heard so far and the evidence that we have available to ourselves.
When did we write to him, Chairman?
I think Chair was about
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Yeah, it was in January. Yeah.
End of January?
End of January.
30th of January.
Right, and
He did say he would have something by the 27th of February.
Did.
I mean, if you want to leave it for another week and see if we can get anything from him. But
it's only a week over, I would like.
Well, no harm setting a reminder.
Yeah.
okay, we're happy enough to do that. Yeah? Okay, thank you for that. Okay, we're into proposed subordinate legislation. We'll have a number of items. I mean, I'll just take it that people have read them, if you don't mind. There are a number of them. We've been advised that they're mostly technical. SL1, the Occupational and Personal Pension Schemes, that's page 117 in your pack. The members' content for the rule to be made.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. The next item is the Occupational Pension Schemes transfer of values and so on. That's on page 118 of your pack. Members' content for the rule to be made.
Agreed.
Okay. The SL1 Occupational Pension Schemes consequential and miscellaneous amendments, page 119 of your pack. Members' content for the rule to be made.
Agreed.
Thank you. SL1 the Pension Schemes Act, and that's page 119 of your pack. Members' content for the rule to be made.
Agreed.
Thank you. SL1 Maternity Allowance Curtailment Regulations. That's at page 134 of your pack.
Agreed.
Members' content. Okay, thank you. SL1 Statutory Maternity Payment Curtailment Regulations 2015. This is page 135 of your pack. Members' content for the rule to be made.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. SL1 Social Security Invalid Care Allowance Amendment Regulations. This would be on, let me see where this is. Page 2 of the table pack, sorry. Thanks, Stuart, for that. Okay, so that's page 2 of your table pack. Are members content for the rule to be made? Okay, thank you. Then moving on to the SRs. SR 79. This is the page 142 of your pack. Members content for the rule to be made. The committee did agree to this on the 8th of January.
Agreed.
No further objections then. I'll read the motion into the record. That the Committee for Social Development has considered the statutory rule SR 13, SR 79/2015, Pension Fund, the Pension Fund and Occupational Pension Schemes, Levy Ceiling Order, Northern Ireland 2015, and subject to the Examiner of Statutory Rules report has no objections to the rule. All agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you for that. And correspondence, just to note, page 151 of your pack, or the Social Security Agency has written to advise the Department's response to Dr. Litchfield's fifth and final independent review of the work capability assessment is available on his website. And to note also, the Department has accepted all of the NI specific items. Okay. One page 156, we make it back. Received another letter of concern regarding the uncertainty of departmental funding, and this one particular concerns the Cathedral Quarter Trust. Clearly, we're still awaiting a response from the department in relation to delay in responding to funding. Members' content, just to note that. Okay, thank you. And our members' content then to deal with the correspondence as outlined in the memo. Okay, thank you for that. Then the forward work programme, page 170. Members content to note the forward work programme.
Great.
Okay. AOB, anything under AOB? Nothing under AOB. Okay, members Thanks for that. Then that concludes the routine business of the committee. And then we move into phase 2 of the closed session to deal with phase 2 of the report.